Well, this is another day that the Lord has made, and once again, we ought to rejoice and be glad in it. I want to make sure I preface every broadcast and I intro with that statement, that scripture, because it's so apropos at this time. It's not just a cliche or something that's part of an ecclesiastical nomenclature. It's very important right now that we got to rejoice and be glad in it. These times are difficult times. We're in unprecedented times and we're navigating uncharted territory. And in these times, there's so much anxiety, so much fear, and so much uncertainty. And so I just want to begin this whole telecast, this broadcast, by encouraging that we got to rejoice. We can rejoice because the Lord made this day, gave us another day, met us this morning with a brand new set of mercies. And because we're alive, that brings promise, that brings potential. Because we're alive, that gives us another opportunity to love and to experience and to feel. It gives us a chance to right what's wrong. It gives us a chance to create. And so even in difficult and perilous times, we still can rejoice and find a reason to be glad in it. So I hope that you're rejoicing today, finding something to laugh about, finding something to learn and be happy about. Don't see the glass as half empty, but rather see it as half full. And so I want to just thank you for tuning in. And I'm rejoiceful because you logged on today. I'm rejoiceful because you're spending this time with us. I'm rejoiceful because we have an opportunity to share and dialogue and grow together. I want to thank you because you're now part of the Hope TV family. Whether it's your first time or you've been with us since our initial broadcast on March 19th. Who would have ever imagined that one broadcast that was on pastoring through a pandemic would now grow to 18 flagship programs that we're offering throughout the week, 6 programs a day, and even adding more content as we speak. So I'm excited, those of you who've been a part of this journey. We just want to make sure that we bring you some positive content that deals with us from the perspective of faith and family, finances, fitness, our faculties, and even intertwining some fun with it. So if you've been blessed by it, our whole aim here at Hope TV is to deal with us and to help inspire and encourage us from a physical perspective, mental, emotional perspective, and a spiritual perspective. And so to that end, we're celebrating 3 weeks of Hope TV as an official platform and social media platform, even though we've been going since March 19th. If you've not yet followed the Hope TV, please do so now on all things social media. We have a Facebook page, a YouTube channel. Please follow those and subscribe to them now. And that way you can get notifications when we upload new content that's not a part of our schedule. You also can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter on the Hope TV. I'm excited. We're now over about 1,100 followers now on Instagram. And so in less than 3 weeks, you've been supportive, and I want to thank you for that. As you're watching, please let us know where you're watching from. Like the page, send a link to someone who you know can benefit from it, because this episode is our Sound Mind broadcast. Every week we're dealing with managing our mental health throughout the pandemic. And it's so very important that we stay on top of our mental health to make sure that we are doing good and have a checkup and have some experts who can help us navigate this whole mental health sphere during this time of pandemic. So thank you so very much. Let us know where you logged on from, the city, the state, even the country. That way we can make sure that we are attentive to your specific demographics so we can minister to you in a way that can also meet you where you are. So again, thank you for logging on to this segment of Sound Mind. Back with us today again is none other than Dr. Gideon Winfrey. As you know, he's been a vital part of this mental health initiative that we've offered from our church for several years now. And we'd be remiss if we did not include him in this. So he's a key face and a key figure on our Sound Mind broadcast. And we want to welcome him back to Sound Mind today. Dr. Winfrey, how are you doing, sir?
I'm well, good brother. Good to be back in your company again.
Good to be. Likewise, I appreciate your time and I appreciate just being available for us. We're in these unprecedented times and people have a lot of issues. And I just think hearing that voice and that perspective from a mental health professional is so vital and so critical in these times. And you've been just invaluable to our ministry here and to our broadcasting and programming. I just want to thank you for that, sir. Thank you for all that you do to inspire so many. I want to get right in today. I think it's very, very vital. as we see the governments and some of the specific states have begun to announce their reopening schedules, and of course we have been affected here locally in Georgia by Governor Kemp's decision to reopen in Georgia. I want to get your perspective on that because a lot of people have been affected by it, and a lot of people have expressed a whole lot of angst about the reopening of the government. And I know that we have to focus on the things that we can control, but I think it's becoming a little more difficult for people to kind of navigate. So I want to just press that a little bit because I think other states will be invariably affected by it. And what is your perspective? Have you given much thought to how we can help people navigate through these times, particularly those who are in Georgia this week?
Yes, sir, Pastor. I've given considerable thought to this. This has been a topic of frequent conversation in my home between my wife, Latoya, and myself. Basically, what I would be able to conclude with everything that's going on is a concept that the Lord put on my spirit very transparently, basically saying that your law is not my logic. Meaning basically that because we have individuals that are in a position of authority, we will do what Christ said as far as rendering upon Caesar what is Caesar's, but also giving God what's God, which is basically utilizing our spiritual logic and also our common sense that He blessed us with in terms of gauging what's really in the best interest of me and my family. The law, understanding the dynamics and the motivations to get the economy back re-energized, we can all understand that and even appreciate it. But basically, every person is responsible for the dominion that they have in their household. So it's a conversation that I think all families should have, but understanding also that, again, what is logical to us is not necessarily dictated by the law in that capacity. So that's what I would share with anyone. And again, one of the constant sayings that I say in my own life is I would never tell anyone to plant a seed in their field that I haven't seen a harvest for in my own. So that is the very principle that we are ushering in our home, having discussions about what we're willing to do as a family as far as ensuring the safety of our children, to maintain our own covering, to make sure that our doorpost continues to be covered, but also that the scarlet cord that's hanging outside our window literally continues to be protective. And I think that it's important for all believers to lean on God's promises and understanding that God's promises are activated through our faith. And so understanding that faith is a reciprocal relationship. And so what we have to do is apply our logic, but then also our faith in making those decisions to make sure that our households are covered and that we have that peace of mind. I would urge anyone to gauge what the reentry looks like. Also being very mindful of the numbers and that the numbers are skewed. One thing that I wanted to share with our population, Pastor Smith, is that one way to know the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in your neighborhood, look at the wait times in your emergency rooms. The wait times in emergency rooms have a correlation between the activity. Currently, where we live in Gwinnett County, our wait times are around 3 to 4 minutes. And so that's a great place to be, which lets us know that there aren't any cases that are stopping the flow of emergency care. The average wait time in emergency rooms in the state of Georgia is 25 minutes. That's on average. So if you really want to know what the news won't tell you, look at the wait times in your emergency rooms and the hospitals in your immediate area, and that'll tell you exactly what's going on. If the wait times are above 25 minutes, that is an indication that there is an influx that triage is able to handle, which is often indicative of the pandemic starting to usher itself into our communities.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. 3 minutes, and average wait time is 25 minutes. That's so important. You made a a point that I think is so important, that we want a sense of normalcy, even though we know it's going to be a new normal. We want things to open back up. The average person is not just enjoying being quarantined. So while
Mm-hmm.
there's some who have made some overtures who are very, very critical and sometimes very misguided to suggest that certain people just want to be taken care of by the government, which we know is absolutely ludicrous, but unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
that's the politics that some people employ. But I've read recently that there are some political leaders who are either advocating the reality that we shouldn't be afraid of opening back up the economy because, in his estimation, this is the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, that there are some things in life that are more important than living. Um, I understand that from an eternal perspective. I understand that, you know, as a man of faith, that when our time is here, we believe in an afterlife. We believe that there's another
Mm-hmm.
place. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of heaven, how do you parse that from a psychological or mental health perspective? Do we justify endangering ourselves? I mean, just for the sake of opening the economy because that's more important than living? Because I don't know if that's antithetical to whatever we've taught to people who've had questions about their own mortality. What would you say to that? What makes someone say that?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, Pastor Smith, is we always have to look at the motivations of any individual, whatever the platform, however they speak. And oftentimes, what's happening is we become so reactive to what we hear that we really take away the dynamics that we have, the dynamics being the Greek derivative of power. And so, oftentimes, when we are pulled into this dynamic, what happens is we react and we don't separate the fact that that person, when they speak, is actually a blessing because you can see what a person's motivations are. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, again, blending the sacred and the secular: be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry or frustrated. And so that right there is one of the greatest principles of wisdom that we can apply in this situation. Let us be slow to speak. Let's listen to what people have to say because everybody has the right to be heard. But ultimately, when I know what your motivations are, I know what your intentions are for me and my population. So when somebody says that, again, it doesn't apply to my logic, I welcome it and I can appreciate it because it lets me know really what your motivation is, which is to get the economy back going, particularly with the demographic of the African American population, where you have really facilitated an arrangement of us to be sick and be sickly. Now that you have demographics, and it's interesting because I was telling my wife, when I do go out, it's always interesting to see African Americans fully masked out and everything, and to see those of other persuasions have a very casual attitude, as if to say, "Well, it doesn't impact us." And so I found myself having some real feelings about that, almost feeling as if that was almost a mark of some sort, and then seeing the panic on my people, the original Hebrew people, seeing it being a concern of mine and feeling something in my spirit. And so, what I would say to our population is that this is a blessing because these are the things that we take to the polls come November. These are the things that we have conversations with our children about, really the dynamic that even in a post-Obama world, in a 2020 world, this is really how society sees you, in addition to the protests that we're seeing. So it's fine for someone to say there are certain things more important than living, but my question to that individual will be, well, what is it that you're living for? If you don't have anything that you're living for that we share a commonality with, then we're going to be disagreeable in that context. But what it is that we're living for, and each family has to ask that question, it does not line up with rushing back out. So you can open up the businesses all day long, but ultimately what's in the best interest of our family dynamics is what we have to lean on and appreciate the fact that certain government officials have basically told you where their value system is.
That's so true. That's a phenomenal response and so apropos. You know, I've been considering this whole piece and very, very adamant. I've been very adamant about prioritizing public safety. And when Governor Kemp made his statement of the day about reopening the government and reopening Georgia, initially I immediately wanted to make sure that people knew that we would still be adhering to the guidelines in terms of following
Mm-hmm.
science.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the challenge I have with that now is that I've been inundated, maybe inundated is a strong word, but I've been approached by several people who have the utmost respect for us, some who are members of our church, as others who are part of our community. And their response is, okay, Pastor, what do I do? Um, because there seems to be some other maneuvering going on because people who have to go back to work, if those businesses are reopened, and if those persons decide to not go back to work at that moment, if they reject going back to work, then they're no longer able to apply for unemployment benefits. And then there are others who say, Pastor, I spent the $1,200 stimulus check. I need to get back to work because this is how I take care of my family. So I can't continue to sit home, apply. The stimulus check is gone, apply for the small business grants that were coming through. Haven't been able to get any type of confirmation on that. The money was gone. And so trying to navigate that space of prioritizing public safety, but also the members of our community who will make a decision to go back to work this weekend because they feel hopeless. I want to kind of bring some insight and bring some perspective to those persons who will be going back, not because they're greedy, but because they feel like they have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
It is just, I've never been in this place before, but it's almost like Solomon splitting the baby in the Bible. But what do you
Mm-hmm.
say in that regard to those who have to make those choices?
Okay. The first thing that I would say in any dynamic such as this is to go into it with a prayerful mindset, not one out of panic, not one out of anxiety. Because when we praying is really it's the filter that leads to the focus. And so when
Mm,
we pray about the dynamics and just being, I am being honest and transparent about God, not being strong, but being real and
mm,
telling God what our concerns are. And at that point, we enter into a space where we can have some serious conversation, some dialogue about God. In referencing what I said earlier about our faith activating God's promises, being able to approach the dynamic as far as what did He say in His Word about the supplying of our needs, and being at peace with whatever decision that we come to. Now, understanding that there is a secular need to provide, and we understand that, but putting ourselves in a position of balance and power in terms of asking our places of employment, what are the steps in the processes that you are taking to ensure my safety upon my return? Making sure that there is a policy in place. Let's check to see how much sick time we have. See if we can use our sick time to extend our time of before we have to return. And then if we just absolutely have to return, trusting God all the more, applying all of the mandates as far as the social distancing, making sure that we have not the fashionable masks, but the ones that are actually recommended by the government as far as being actually impactful with preventing the spread and whatnot, making sure that we arm ourselves with our own weaponry as far as the sanitation process is concerned. And I think that if we go into that and we go into it with a prayerful mind, a clear heart, and a clear perspective as far as being on the offense versus the defense, I think that changes the perspective a lot for any individual, because right now we feel as if we're on the defense, but we're the pillars of God. We're the titans of the kingdom, and so we so often have a mindset of being, on the receiving end as far as the enemy and how the world perceives us. But we are. It's the reason why God said put on the whole armor. So we don't put on the armor just to be on the defense. We also have a sword and a shield that we're supposed to use. So I think if we integrate those two mindsets together and we put together our own weaponry in the sacred and the secular as far as our own protection, I believe that God will see that, be pleased with it. We have a peace of mind and we can integrate slowly back into some ebb and flow as far as our employment is concerned, if it's an absolute must.
that's good. I think it's a great perspective because those critical decisions have to be made. And I'm just trying to figure out how do we continue to minister to people in those regards. And you have a lot of other people who are experiencing, mass trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and I want to make sure that we don't minimize
Yes.
this. It's pandemic, but it's also trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to negate that or spiritualize it or demonize it or even politicize it. But this is, regardless of what has happened to get us to this point, regardless of if that's been governmental or political ineptitude or whatever you want to call it, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, the result is mass trauma. So, how do we
Mm-hmm.
help people who've had to endure mass trauma?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Pastor Smith, because ironically, I had a conversation with one of my peers who is a practitioner, and she's community based, and she actually contracted the coronavirus and actually ended up being in the hospital for COVID-19. And the first thing we immediately did is we surrounded her in prayer and love and support, and we actually started a fund to supplement her income while she was gone. So that was our act of benevolence for her. But we were praying for her. People were seeing her patients in her absence. And when she reached out to me, we had a conversation because she said that she was ready to go back and get back in there. And I cautioned her on doing that because of the very thing that you're saying now. I said, what you went through was official trauma. And I want you to
Right.
take time to just reintegrate yourself back into it. Because I said this is on the same level of a self grieving process because you entered into a dynamic which was a very unique dynamic because she herself was a practitioner being treated by physicians who were practitioners who had their own mental health and symptom exasperation and stresses that they were absorbing for her. So she was in a unique position as patient practitioner who was hearing other practitioners. So she was privy to things that a lot of people would be privy to. And so she said, okay, well, I'm ready to go back in. I said, okay, well, take baby steps. And the next day, Pastor, she called me crying. Voice was quivering. And she said, Doc, I can't do it. I thought I could. Um, I'm thinking about, when I go out here, where did I get it from? So now all of the things that come when a person comes out of a trauma and the stillness of the unresolved trauma starts to seep itself in. So now comes the questions, now come the voices, and now come all the feelings that are rushing. And so I told her, I said, you're not ready, and that's okay. You don't have a point to prove to anybody. You owe it to yourself to be as mentally sound as possible. And if you're not there, you serve no good to anybody in that capacity. So the first thing we can do is recognize it as a trauma, even if other people don't see it that way. It's just like when we lose somebody that we love, everybody responds to death differently. And everybody's going to respond to this dynamic differently based on the level of impact that it had. So even if individuals don't see it as traumatic, as far as the support system, is something that I would caution everyone on because this will have a long-term impact on it because individuals' lives will literally dangled in front of their faces and they're seeing their peers pass from this dynamic. So there's a lot of questions that even death can't necessarily provide because you don't necessarily know the manner in which it was contracted. There's so many questions. So the bottom line, Pastor, it is traumatic. We're going to treat it as traumatic. We're going to treat it the same way we would with somebody who served in a war, somebody that saw a tragic death. We're going to treat it the same exact way in order for people to be able to work through that and to pace themselves emotionally and psychologically.
That's so good. I just want to make sure that we get the all the knowledge because I mean, thousands of people are watching this, and while your services have been offered, and there are others doing virtual counseling, for people to have some perspective, just to have something, a nugget they can drop with people is so incredibly important until we can get them to the professionals and the doctors like yourself who can help the people wholeness. Um, One of my challenges is dealing with some of our members of our community who have
Mm-hmm.
loved ones, parents or grandparents who've been affected with 19, and they can't get to them because they're in a different state, or because you know they can't see them in that situation because they don't want to be around the elderly people to you know perhaps possibly asymptomatic person infecting someone. So what would you say to the people who parents have been diagnosed or grandparents have been diagnosed with COVID? That person lives in Atlanta, but their parent is in Dallas somewhere. What kind of insights would you give that person who can't be there at a time like this, due to just travel or finances or just a disease? What do you say to a person who can't be with that loved one right now to kind of help make medical decisions or whatever? What do you say to that person?
Well, what I would say to that person is the beautiful thing about God is that He's everywhere. And I, in those situations, would employ a person to really lean on God as far as communicating your own limitness to God. Because again, through our prayer and through our conversations with God, we see our finite nature, but we see His infinite spirit and who He is. And so it automatically ushers in the ability for us to have a dialogue about God, this is where I need you to manifest yourself in this situation. Now, as far as the secular aspect is concerned, what I would employ anyone to do is to be able to connect with individuals who are there. In most instances, there's somebody in their parents' life that is a contact person as far as their social group. Is somebody there that they have some type of connection with. Very rarely are loved ones alone. So establishing kind of like an emergency contact when you go on a job. That emergency contact is the person that I can talk to that can be my eyes and ears when I can't. So establishing that relationship, and as a matter of fact, I think it'll be great for everybody to have that. I told the staff that I work with, as soon as we ushered in our telehealth mandate, the first thing I said to them was make sure that your address and your emergency contact is current. So in case anything happens, we're not scurrying trying to find people. So that's a great housekeeping practice to have just in general. But in cases such as these, making sure that we have key contact people as far as the representatives at the hospital, and whoever runs in that loved one circle, a minimum of 4 people. Make sure that we have email addresses. Make sure that we have phone numbers that are accurate, and making certain that if we can't get one, we can get other individuals. So it allows us to feel empowered because we're not just sitting back waiting on a medical staff that is completely overwhelmed, but we're taking charge as far as what we can do and what gives us peace, even if a situation goes in the way that we don't. Even if a situation goes in a manner in which we don't desire, we can look at the situation and say there was absolutely nothing else I could have done. I talked to this person, I had this connection, and even though it may hurt as far as alternative life dynamics, it's the peace of mind of saying I walked with a person as long as I could. So I think that in doing that, it takes the anxiety from having to be plugged into a world of medical professionals. It takes that anxiety away because we feel empowered because we have eyes and ears that are on the ground there.
Yes, that's significant. We reduce any type of feelings of guilt that may come later. That you literally did
Mm-hmm.
everything you could in the interim. You know, there's one other dynamic that I'm facing as a pastor, and I've had several conversations, and I'm curious about yours. Um, there are people in family situations, particular relationships. There are some marriages that are struggling, and marriages are struggling now because it is as if the coronavirus has magnified or exacerbated maybe recurring issues or issues that have been there, but being busy, being able to be away,
Mm-hmm.
um, being able to leave the house or go play golf or hang with friends, somehow giving them a reprieve from dealing with reality, or they had not faced those situations all day. But now, because there's no place to run, nowhere to go, they're having to face what was difficult all day. What kind of advice do you give to people who may feel like they're being smothered by their spouses, or some issues that have been affected that have arisen to the forefront, and they're just sick and tired? You know, I saw a meme on social media that said that some people are gonna come out of this with the boo, somebody's gonna come out of this expecting a child in 9 weeks, and some people are gonna come out of this thing uh, divorced, separated. So, what advice do you give to the couples that aren't doing well in the pandemic because there's no reprieve, there's no place to run, there's no other haven, there's no me time, there's, they can't be by themselves? What do you say to those people who facing those types of situations?
But what I would say to those individuals, Pastor, is I think, any type of sickness or dynamic that's uncomfortable is going to exacerbate any obvious dynamic. And one thing that I would employ any couple, individually and collectively, right now, the telehealth practice is available. It's what I do. I have couples that are reaching out to me that want to have marital counseling, couples counseling virtually. So it's an opportunity for me. The way that I see it is everything that you said earlier about no longer are you able to run. In this moment, there are some decisions that have to be made. There's some decisions, there's some insight that's coming to the forefront in terms of, okay, these are some things that I have to look at and evaluate. Just as what you said earlier, there may be some divorces and some pregnancies that come out of this, but some marriages are going to be saved. There are going to be some marriages that are going to be made out of this. So this is, from a spiritual aspect, I see this as God's pruning because of our running, our running away and busying ourselves, and then we're just delaying the obvious, and sometimes wasting our time and other people's times. So what I would encourage encourage anyone to do is have, my go-to phrase, the adult conversation with themselves in terms of saying, okay, here's an opportunity for me to really evaluate myself. Not so much my marriage and my relationship, but I like for individuals to look at themselves in terms of saying, is this a me issue? What is it that I'm doing wrong? How am I following God's mandate for my marriage? And oftentimes, I tell my wife all the time, when I ask my wife questions, I always say I'm gonna point the finger back at me, because ultimately I'm not responsible for anybody else changing. I'm responsible for what I can do. And ultimately, that's what you have to put your effort into. So in situations like these, if you have a lot of blaming going back and forth with no self-examination, then that's probably what the core of the issue is right there, is that there's no grace, there's no compassion. And those are dynamics that if you look at yourself, honestly, there's so much work that we need to do individually as partners, that when you start the construction of self, you kind of stop worrying about what your spouse is doing, because there's so much of your own stuff that you see to be kind of messed up and out of order. So when you start working on your floor of the house, then it changes how the house looks. So if you have a two-story home, say from a marital component, you have a two-story home. If I'm the bottom floor and she's the top floor, well, when people come in, they see the bottom floor. So let me work on the bottom floor, because eventually what's going to happen is the top floor is going to want to accent what the bottom floor looks like. So then the whole house is beautiful in that aspect. So just looking at myself, why do I respond to things the way that I do? Let me look at me, asking God, show me me. Show me me. Let me get to work on me. And if I work on me, and the Bible supports this, that an unbelieving spouse can be changed because of the actions of a believing spouse. So if I really get into my marriage the way that I should, as far as my marriage being a true three-corded rope, if it's a true three-corded rope, and understanding that husband and wife are supposed to be intertwined with God, let me have those conversations with God. Ask God to show me me. And when I start working on me, it's going to change the atmosphere, how I react to things, how I view things. Let me check with God to see, where am I as a husband, where am I as a wife. And then when I start working on me, it's going to change the atmosphere and change my mindset and ultimately my emotions. So I'll either get peace from compliance, or I get peace from completion. But either way, if I usher that perspective in, God's going to do what He's promised that He would do in my marriage. Even if it's the dissolution of the marriage, He'll give me peace in it. So working on self in this dynamic under the marital umbrella would be what I would recommend for any couple.
Outstanding. And one last question I want to ask you today. There are some first responders we've been blessed to. We've been in partnership with several hospitals, Emory University, and we're providing food to them on a weekly basis, and we've been blessed to do that. Hot meals, Emory Hospital, North Decatur, Hillendale, we've been blessed to do that. And of course, through our program and offering spiritual uplift and empowerment and programming to those persons. But I want to just close out by dealing with the mental, emotional aspects of those first responders. Again, because many of them are watching all over the country, nurses, doctors, and hospital administrators. And so they're experiencing trauma now as well. Trauma of seeing people work, defy the decrees and defy social distancing, and then end up having to come and provide medical services to those individuals, not being able to have relationships or fellowship or intimacy or connection with their own families. So those persons who are in the field, again, who were traumatized by COVID-19, what piece of advice or counsel would you give them?
Well, I would tell them to recognize their own humanity. The fact that when you feel what you feel, you're literally in a war zone. You are literally in a war zone with an enemy that you can't see. And again, that's biblically supported, that the principalities, we don't fight these battles in the physical realm, we fight them in heavenly places. So understanding that, we understand our limitations, and we understand that in those limitations we have some strong feelings, some strong sentiments, and there are reactions to that are perfectly within the realm of us being fleshly creations and fleshly beings. Whatever you feel in those moments, crying is okay, being angry is okay, but allowing those emotions to come to the forefront and utilizing a support system, and also making sure that in your support system is other people that you want to make sure that your support system are not individuals that are typically as emotionally worked up as you. You got to have some balance. And so I think that it's in these instances, Utilize the benefits programs that you have. People in my industry, we're available. I'm still continuing to do my Somebody's Listening initiative, just to make certain that people have an opportunity to just have that platform just to be heard and say, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm scared, in a safe place. And utilizing that as a processing board, it literally bleeds out the rawness of those emotions in order to help people think more coherently and be more emotionally sound in that aspect. So be honest with your emotions, be transparent, utilize the benefits that you have. There are therapists, counselors that are available, um, to make sure that you navigate through this. And I think that it would be great to start the process now, Pastor, because you don't want it to all build up and then it becomes overwhelming and then you have that emotional break and then you're really out for an extended period of time. So utilizing some type of outlet, some type of resource that as you become filled, you have an ability to be able to release it in a way that allows you actually to continue to serve in the capacity that you are without being overwhelmed. So it's a balance that they have to take in order to make certain that they can continue on and have some type of balance to their life emotionally.
Man, my friend, you're always invaluable. What a tool you are, and you offered your services. And I want you to again, just how can people contact you if they want to follow up and further discussion with you? How can those viewers get in touch with you?
Okay. Well, I can be contacted through valianttherapy.com. Valiant Therapy is also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So reach out to me. The emails come directly to me. So I get it personally. And so when I respond, it's actually me responding and not someone else because I'm a very hands on individual. And I care greatly about the care of anyone who reaches out for any type of assistance. So going to the website, going to the contact part of the website, and just sending me the information, and we can take it from there and do what we need to do. Also across the social media platforms, all those come directly to me as well. So I'm here and ready and desiring to serve our first responders and anyone in any kind of need to make sure that God's kingdom is multiplied and subdued.
Man of God, you've been a blessing. I thank God for you and your family. I pray God's blessings on you as you continue to serve God's people and invest in us. I pray that God reciprocates that in your life and everything that you continue to touch, that God's going to crown it with favor, abundance, and success and increase. So thank you so very much, and look forward to having you
Thank
back
you.
very, very soon on Sound Mind. My friends, you've been watching this episode of Sound Mind, Managing Mental Health in the Pandemic of the Hope TV, and I hope that you've been blessed by this broadcast, this Hope TV production. And if you've been blessed by the broadcast, why don't you consider sending a link, sharing this particular episode with a friend. Dr. Winfrey was amazing today and shared a lot of things in us to help us to maintain our sanity in this pandemic and stay healthy from an emotional perspective. It's tough out here, but there are resources. God has sent gifts and professionals who have designated their lives and dedicated their lives to ensure our wholeness. And so I want you to be whole, be well today. As we log off and as we close this broadcast, always remember this. If you'll be good to God, God will be good to you. You've been watching Hope TV. God bless you.